reach out to me.
You know, honestly, I think you're right. I think this new video is going to be just as awesome as the Super Nintendo was.
Oh, you mean Sega Genesis?
The Super Nintendo.
Sega Genesis. You're mispronouncing it. Sega.
The Super Nintendo won the console wars for a reason. It's the Super Nintendo.
Why would you play as a fat plumber when you could play as an awesome blue hedgehog like Sonic the Hedgehog?
You cannot possibly think that Sonic is cooler than Mario.
Hey guys, we've got a few thoughts on this subject.
Blake and Jonah from the upcoming CBS All Access Documentary Console Wars?
Console Wars? What's going on?
Alright guys, we are back and we have a very special treat for you guys today. We are here with the directors of the upcoming CBS All Access Documentary Console Wars,
Ooh.
Mr. Blake Harris and Jonah Toulis. Thank you guys very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So we want to kick things off with a simple question to Blake. So you wrote the original book Console Wars, and now it's being adapted and you're co-directing the documentary. So what is it? What's it about, and why did you want to tell this story?
Sure. So the book, the documentary, and eventually the series is about the battle between Sega and Nintendo, and specifically, it's about the underdog story about how Sega, starting in 1990, had less than 5% of the market, and through this really impressive cast of characters and a lot of outside-the-box strategies, was able to take on Nintendo and for a period of time surpass them, and then for a sad period of time fall very quickly. And this is something, I started working on the book in 2012, and Jonah is a longtime friend and collaborator, and while I was starting to do that research, I didn't even know what it was going to become, he suggested that we consider doing a documentary, and I thought that was a great idea because this really, it's a story, it's a timeless David and Goliath story. It's a really interesting story about the game industry. And it's also a story that's very important to people around our age, people who grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, because, before the term gamer even existed, this was just what you did when you were a kid. Right. So for Jonah and I, it was incredible to go back and sort of have this behind-the-scenes tour of our childhood and also get to play with and find all this archival footage that's, the sort of probably the real star of the film. And obviously I couldn't include it in the book because it's a book, and, that made it a lot of fun to tell it in this format as well.
That's awesome. Oh, jinx. So, Jonah, I guess the next question would be for you, and it'd be kind of following up on what he said. What makes you interested in the console wars, and how did somebody come around to start directing a documentary about the console wars of the 1990s?
Well, it's kind of a crazy story. Blake had come to me with this idea. He had been starting to talk to people in the Sega and Nintendo universe, and then sort of we realized there was a story here, and we're like, this should be a book, this should be a doc, this should be a narrative film or series, and we're like, you know what? Let's just see what we can do, try to do whatever we can. Somebody's going to want to do something with this.
And just to jump in, because Jonah and I are often at our best jumping in back and forth, but
so are we.
I can't express how not successful we were at this point in our lives. Like, we were trying very hard to be successful filmmakers and screenwriters and writers, and so, we were like, oh, well, hopefully one of these things will work out, and
we were also coming off that 2008 writer's strike that really slowed down the whole industry for a while as well.
Yep.
But we said, who's a good partner for this? We had a relationship with Seth Rogen and his camp, took it to them, and where we initially just kind of wanted their blessing, they kind of jumped on board and were like, we want to do this full-fledged with you, all the things. We want to help with the book, help with the doc, and turn it into a movie and then eventually a series as well.
I'm really glad I'm sorry to interrupt. Really glad you name dropped Seth Rogen. How did he get involved? And is he a gamer? I'm just curious about that.
He is a big gamer, and we did this thing where, like, who's the right partner on any project like this? If you want to raise money for a doc, you have to kind of package it in a way that's exciting to buyers. And what happened? We had met with the head of Seth Rogen's company, James Weaver, a year or two before. He's very close with our manager, Julian Rosenberg, who's also a very serious producer on this project. And we're like, what if Seth gets involved? And we went in there for a meeting, sat with Seth and his partner, Evan Goldberg, for probably over an hour and just talked about it. And by the end of the day, they were on board.
Yeah, and just to show you, again, like where we were in our careers and how life-changing this was for us, it was obviously incredible that we went in think it was a Thursday, and by the end of the day, Seth and Evan called us back. But it was also Jonah and I were saying, like, this is the first time in our careers that any decision maker ever like got back to us within the same day, because we'd always meet with people, and, you know, have our people call your people. We, you know, it kind of fizzle out. So the fact that we heard back from anyone and they wanted to do something with us was like pretty game changing.
We know the feeling.
There was an incredibly long process after that as well.
Yes.
When you deal with sort of putting together any project, especially when there's so many different pieces of intellectual property involved with it. But you know, and here we are today, and it's all coming to fruition.
That is
awesome.
awesome.
And I give a lot of credit to Seth and Evan. Like Jonah said, there's been a lot of stops and starts, and Seth and Evan have gone from being very successful to, like, you know, A-list, top tier, everything. And they've stuck with this project since 8 years now. And so,
Wow.
you know, I really tip my hat to them. It would have been easy for them to just say, oh, you know, we're doing bigger and better things. But they've really believed in this since the beginning, and that's been awesome.
That is. That's
It
really,
is really
that is
awesome.
really cool. It's a cool story. So obviously the console wars in general has been around for as long as there was home consoles. Whether it was the Atari versus the ColecoVision versus Intellivision, the PS2 versus the GameCube versus the original Xbox. Why do you think specifically the Super Nintendo versus the Genesis is so intriguing to people? Why is that specific console war the one that's talked about the most? Like, what is it that makes that one so interesting?
That's for both.
Yeah, for either of you.
I mean, I think that's when the game changed. I think literally the game changed. Nintendo was the only game in town, and here was its rival, and they were just trying to one up each other. And the marketing also took sort of hold on everything. And you're going to see a lot of that in the doc of the sort of guerrilla marketing tactics that Sega does to take on Nintendo. And I mean, Blake probably has more on this. I think that it was a special time.
Yeah, like you're saying, like everything, you know, like everything in life, it's timing to a degree. And I think that it's significant that as much as there was, you know, the Magnavox Odyssey versus the Atari 2600 and other console wars during the late 70s and early 80s, you know, nowadays, Joan and I will spend an evening playing The Legend of Zelda or Mario Bros. 3, but we're not playing Pitfall or
That's a
Pac-Man.
good point.
You know, like, there's something about the games from that era, from the 80s and 90s, that at least have withstood the test of time. And then sort of what Jonah was alluding to, I think, with like the commercials and the marketing, I think it was just sort of this golden age where there was a sweet spot where the arcade industry had kind of died, but the home console industry was still thriving. And so, you know, back with the Atari games, you could play them in an arcade, and they would actually be better in the arcade, whereas now the home consoles were pretty much as good as what you could get in the arcade. And then I think just like the rise of MTV, it was a good time to get a lot of eyeballs, and it was also a pre-internet era where you still had these big tentpole companies, and it was sort of just divided between, you know, this tribalistic sense of one side and the other, whereas now, like, every form of entertainment would probably be, you know, small slivers of people having different reasons for liking different things.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I never actually looked at it like that from that perspective. That's really interesting. So Blake, on this channel we talk a lot about Nintendo versus Sega. We've made countless videos on comparing games head to head, like from those systems, etc. But this documentary seems to really dive deep into the inner workings of both companies. And I know you guys spoke with a lot of people who were like right there in the trenches, specifically like the former CEO of Sega of America, Tom Kalinske. So was it difficult finding or getting information from people like this, or was it really were people really open to talking about their experiences with this whole thing,
wanting to tell their stories?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think that two things come to mind. One is that as much as Jonah and I have not always have wished that it would have been a quicker process, of course. The upside to it taking a while, maybe not this long, is that it helped us develop relationships with the subjects and build trust and make sure that we were able to get the stories that we wanted to tell. So I think that, and also dealing with Nintendo at first, they sort of stonewalled us, or had a corporate standpoint of not talking to us, and then Jonah and I were able to appeal to them and show them what we're trying to accomplish and earn their trust and show them why we felt like their point of view is important. So it's a process. The one thing that always we had working for us was that we were just, I've said this with the book, like before I wrote the book, I just wanted to read a book on the console wars, and that's kind of how it was with the documentary and with any of this. Like our first conversations were like, how has no one done this before? So there was some element of when we're reaching out to Tom Kalinske or Al Mills or Ella Buskirk or Gail Tilden or Howard Lincoln, like, even if they're standoffish, they are sort of excited to tell these stories that they've had for years and have to find, some excited people like us excited to hear them. So that we were beneficiaries of sort of being the first to really ask them to tell these stories that they always thought were interesting, but they didn't think other people thought were interesting.
And this was one of the most exciting times in all of their lives. This business war was incredible to them. It was a game changer, and sort of they look back on it so fondly. I mean, it was a long time ago, so sometimes they really got to like think hard to remember sort of the different aspects of it. But thankfully, we've interviewed beyond sort of who we have on camera. Blake did tons of pre-interviews with, I think, over 200 people. So we're able to kind of paint the picture before we even got in there to interview people in the room. We were able to kind of know what questions to ask and maximize our time. Because when you sit with someone for 5 or 6 hours, you want to make sure that like you maximize their energy in the right way.
Yeah.
And
what Jordan said is really important too about it being like this important time in their lives. Because for us as kids or even just as fans, you sort of imagine working at Sega or Nintendo as like working at Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. But I remember early on we were kind of worried, like, oh, are they going to be like, yeah, it was okay? But like it was kind of like I was just getting a paycheck. But it really made it fun that even if they were only at Sega or Nintendo for 3 years or 10 years, like they looked back on it with the same rose-colored glasses that we did. Like to them, it was such an important time, and they that made them even more interested in telling the story because they loved reliving it.
Yeah, that's
and they all have so much respect for everybody else, like both sides of the coin. Like the Nintendo guys respect the Sega guys respect the Nintendo guys, even though they were at each other's throats during the
game. I would push back on that.
Maybe now. Maybe now they do.
I'm saying now.
Oh, right.
I feel like my favorite moments were like Peter Main or Howard Lincoln, and maybe sometimes off camera, how little they respected Sega after all these years. Of them certainly did have respect, and especially Nintendo, who were, this was not the most flattering years for them, in their opinion. They at least, they were pushed, and they did get better. But I was actually a little surprised that some of them look back and, a lot of the Sega people think the Nintendo people were bullies, and the Nintendo people think the Sega people were just, sizzle over substance marketing guys.
Right.
So it was a mix of both, and it was kind of fun for us to be in the middle of that and kind of figure out which this interview subject, are they one of the ones that respects the other side, or are they one of the ones that kind of hates the other side, and how to bring that out of them?
So since you just brought up marketing, let's briefly discuss that for a second. So the marketing from both Sega and Nintendo in this era was phenomenal, especially the marketing from Sega. So the whole Sega does what Nintendo don't mantra. I mean, they literally said in the course of 4 words anything anybody needed to hear to explain the difference, why they were better or whatever than Nintendo. So do you think that mantra, coupled with the buzzwords they used, like blast processing and things like that, do you think it was the marketing department that really gave Sega their shot at taking the crown from the big N, or was it just the hardware or the games, or what? The number one thing, basically.
It was marketing. I mean, they were. You got to remember, they were also. It's a combination of marketing, but also sort of the guerrilla tactics they used. Walmart would carry Sega products, and Tom had done business with them for years at Mattel, and the only way they could do it was go into Bentonville, Arkansas, take over a warehouse, and offer free games for everybody, but buy all the billboards leading in and out of town, and buy the football cushions at the University of Alabama Stadium. That's like guerrilla marketing at its finest.
Yeah.
And then you sort of get to sort of what Goodby at Silverstein did with the Sega Scream, of course, and sort of the fast-paced MTV exciting marketing that really kind of drew in the teenage crowd, which is what they were looking for.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
smart.
a good realization for me and for us early on was, like a lot of people, especially in a pre-internet era, we just sort of equate marketing with television commercials or print ads.
Sure.
But sort of realizing that marketing is more than that, the book and the movie both discuss at length Sonic, the creation of Sonic, and all credit due to Yuji Naka and Oshima-san and the team in Japan that actually made the game. Like, there'd be no story without that. But America, it was very important that they created like a Mickey Mouse or a Mario for Sega, and the way that they changed the character and the way that they messaged Sonic, like that is all part of the marketing process. It's not just those 30-second spots. It's what's the story you want to tell for your company to the world. And so helping us see it that way and then conveying that to the viewer is a big part of why I think we would both say marketing was the number one thing. But it's more than just the commercials. It's this whole mentality of getting Sega into the living rooms and making kids and teenagers and adults excited for Sega and to buy Sega products and to have that in your home.
And to make it work for an American audience, which is sort of what the Sega of America really did. You're going to see in the doc the evolution of Sonic and sort of how the Americans kind of took hold of the Japanese design and really figured out how to, make it work in America. I mean, when you see what Sonic was, he was initially in this rock band and had a girlfriend and named Madonna.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
You'll kind of how
That's
Alan
wild.
Nielsen and Madeline they kind of deconstructed that.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I remember a few years ago, John and I were playing Sonic Generations, and we were kind of
Great
saying
game, by the way. Sorry, love that game.
It was a great game. But I kind of had not realized how much the Sonic that was there at the launch, the Sega of America-driven Sonic, had changed, and the more recent Sonic, at least at the time of that game, was much more like the Sega of Japan version. He was not with the girlfriend Madonna, but he was much spikier features, less cuddly, less kind of whimsical, and you sort of see these different mentalities, and that of course is a big part of what the doc is. That at the end of the day, Sega is a Japanese-based company, but our story focuses on the American business because that's where Sega was successful. It wasn't even successful in Japan, and also that's where the biggest market was. So it was a very interesting dynamic where the company that's actually doing the R&D and developing the hardware and also developing games like Sonic is not even where the big frontier of the battle was.
And that relationship becomes a very important part of the story, especially towards the end of the film. Really, the Sega of Japan, Sega of America relationship is incredibly complex and interesting, and you'll see the exciting kind of ways we dive into that.
It sounds good. I'm really excited about it. And it's funny you mentioned marketing because I know I was one of those kids that ran out and got a Sega Genesis because the marketing was incredible for that. But with that being said, Sega has made other systems. They made the Dreamcast, they made the Game Gear. What is it about the Sega Genesis you think that gave it this lasting power? And, with the release of the 32X and the Sega Saturn at the same time, do you think that kind of mixed it up and kind of was the decline for Sega at that point? Or do you think the Genesis was just lightning in a bottle? That's the one and only chance they had? Blake, Jonah?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely don't think it was the one and only chance they had. Of the three consoles you just named, the Dreamcast was at the time was as impressive or better than the Genesis. I remember when the Dreamcast came out. By the way, Jonah and I grew up together, so I'm trying to think. I remember our high school when the Dreamcast came out, it was a huge deal. And the reason that the Dreamcast was not successful and why Sega ended up pulling the plug didn't have to do with the quality of hardware. It had to do with business concerns. So that's just another indicator that it's not just this meritocracy of hardware and software. There's the business side actually plays a role in what's successful and what's not. I do think that part of the magic of the 16-bit era, whether it's the Genesis or the Super Nintendo, is just the pickup and playability. It'd be much more likely that my father or mother or brother, who aren't much of gamers now, would still pick up, Sonic and play that. Whereas, NFL 2K on Dreamcast or Crazy Taxi, which are great games, they're less likely to it's a little more confusing for them. So there was something about the innocence and the accessibility to a mass audience of the 16-bit era that I think is part of why the Genesis did so well and sort of remains so beloved.
Right. Good answer. I mean, it was well said. So while we're on the subject of the two big companies, and I'm sure you said that your documentary dives into, which we're both really excited to see, very much so. I mean, other companies have had mascots. What do you think it is about Mario and Sonic, a blue hedgehog and an Italian plumber, that just had lasting power and such an impact? I mean, everybody knows Sonic and everybody knows Mario.
I feel like they were very much the first mascots of these companies when you really think about it.
Yeah, we had Alex Kidd on the Genesis.
Donkey Kong, but I mean, wait, what?
Right.
Alex Kidd Alex Kidd, man, he was a system seller.
That's right. The four of us know about him.
Yeah, Alex Kidd, he issued a correction for you, Jonah.
First good mascot.
There you go. Much better. Much better.
I don't know. I think it might have just been in relation to this was the golden age, at the beginning of the golden age of video games, and these were the first characters that jumped on board. It was, Ty Cobb and Cy Young. It was These were the guys that everybody, that were on the cover of all their magazines, and these were the guys that kind of we grew up with. And I think that that's sort of the biggest thing for me. And they were great games. They were really great games. And I think that's a big part of
it. And also, again, it comes a lot back to the marketing, and our story is largely a behind the scenes business story. Is like they went after each other. Nowadays, and I don't mean to cast my own judgment on it, but like, at Xbox and Sony, they are praising the other companies. And it's not a head-to-head sort of thing in the way that Tom Kalinske very intentionally went after Nintendo, and then by the end, it went after Sega. And you just don't see those kinds of corporate rivalries today, whether it's Sega does what Nintendo don't, or just the blast processing making fun of the competition. And that's a big part of why we were so attracted to the Sega story. And because you don't really see that kind of stuff anymore.
Right. So when I was growing up, gaming felt very different then. So obviously all the kids on the playground played video games. I played video games, etc. But you didn't really hear a lot about adults playing, your parents playing, things like that. Nowadays, everybody is a gamer. It's really taken over the entire pop culture zeitgeist, for lack of a better term. Even my mom plays games, which she's almost 70 years old. It's mind blowing to me.
Mm-hmm.
So from a cultural aspect, why do you think video games have become such an important part of people's lives nowadays? And I guess we'll start with Blake. What do you think was the reason for that?
I mean, I imagine it'd be the same answer as Jonah. That in a way is why we're telling the story, because that we credit Sega for that to a large degree. That Sega, Tom Kalinske wisely realized that Sega would have very little success going after Nintendo, basically trying to get the target audience of Nintendo, kids 6 to 14. So he zagged where Nintendo zigged and went after an older adult audience. And, we have to concede that some credit is due to the fact that the Nintendo kids were growing up. So it wasn't like, people were aging up, people who'd grown up with gaming as a part of it as well. But it was very intentional. And Sega wanted to make video games from childish playthings into a form of mainstream entertainment like the music industry or anything else.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it really it evolved with the gamers. And I think that's the key. It sort of evolved to attract more and more people as the games got more complex or more simple. And I think that's the key element, that they did what they needed to do to attract the gamers that they wanted, and it kept expanding.
So Blake, you got Console Wars, which is the first full-length documentary going to CBS All Access. I mean, how exciting is that for you to see your dream kind of come out to this big reality now and see it for everybody to see now? I mean, I watched the trailer. I'm really excited. I'm sure a bunch of other people is. I mean, that's got to be an exciting feeling, right?
Oh, for sure, especially because it took so long for us to get here. But Jonah and I, if you were, the word that you probably heard the most whenever we talked about the film was time capsule, right? Or I guess that's 2 words. But we really wanted it to be this time capsule of that era. So for us, as much as we've actually literally seen the movie thousands of times, it still is I would say it's still kind of enjoyable, especially the archival stuff, because it is the time capsule. I mean, it brings us back in time to when we were growing up and to that same curiosity and passion that made us want to do it. So it's pretty amazing that we'll finally get to share with other people and hopefully bring back those great memories and relive that exciting video game time for them.
Awesome.
And I mean, Jonah, that's awesome because it's a major streaming service that it's laying on. So I'm sure that's got to be awesome for you too.
It's incredible, and it's the first from the streaming service, and they're putting a lot of energy behind it. CBS All Access has been amazing. And they really let us do this thing right. They gave us the freedom to, obviously they put in their notes, but they gave us the freedom to really, we went for it. The music is exciting and dramatic. We have a 7-time Emmy winner, Jeff Beal, who did House of Cards, who did the music. We have pop music from that era to give it to sort of put us in that place. We really let the characters tell the story. There's no narrator. It's all from the character's point of view. And then we get in the room back in that 90s footage where we see Tom, we see Howard Lincoln, and we kind of can get really immersed in that world. And I think that it's hopefully going to be a special thing for CBS to kind of, show what they can do on the premium side of things right now.
Right.
Awesome. So that's the meat and potatoes part of the interviews, but now we have the lightning round. So a couple of fun questions. So, which console did you guys have as a kid, or which did you prefer, the Super Nintendo or the Genesis?
I think I know Blake's answer already, but let's see if I'm right.
Well, no, it's funny. I actually was always like behind a few years. It was like, when it would get on disc, my parents would be like, time for you to get your new system, and I'd be like, thank you. And then, so I got like regular Nintendo. I got original Nintendo when Super Nintendo was kind of like about to come out, and then years later, I was given the choice of a Sega Saturn or a PlayStation. And again, I played every system at all my friends' houses, so that was not a thing. But later, and I was duped into a Sega Saturn by a Tom Kalinske display at Epcot Center that let us play for free. So I got a Sega Saturn, and then no games came out, and that was the last of my systems till PS2.
Jonah, I was right there with you, man. I stuck it out with Sega all the way to the Saturn. I even had the Dreamcast, but yeah. All my friends were talking about all these games, and I was like, I got Tomb Raider. Yay.
And what about you, Blake?
I was saved by a Toys R Us employee, because I remember I had my bar mitzvah, and my parents were going to let me buy one thing with the bar mitzvah money, and I wanted to get a new console. And I went to Toys R Us, and I said, I want to get the Sega Saturn. And the Toys R Us employee was like, no, you want the Sony PlayStation. and he talked me out of it. But before that, I had an NES, like 1 in 3 households in America, and I actually really wanted a Super Nintendo because why not? I love the NES. But my parents wouldn't get it for my brother and I because it wasn't backwardly compatible. And so we ended up getting a Sega Genesis. So maybe that answers your question of how I ended up on Team Sega. But I think that's part of why I was attracted to the story was ultimately it was a business decision somewhere that led to my becoming a Sega person, because it wasn't because I wanted Sega. It was because Nintendo did things that alienated people like my parents.
Right.
So that being said, we do touch on Nintendo's like humble origins as well, but sort of we'll let you guys see that for yourself.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to it.
I was going to say, though, I hope you gave a shout out to that guy at Toys R Us that talked to you in the PlayStation.
Yeah.
Hope he gets one shout.
Yeah.
So what about modern systems? What's your current platform of choice? Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, or the PC Master Race? There you go. Nice answer.
I have an Xbox, but I play with the original Nintendo Mini a lot.
Nice.
You both just came some of my favorite people all of a sudden.
All right, so it's a UFC fight, okay? There's an octagon. 2 people go inside. One of them is a blue hedgehog. It's Sonic. The other one is an Italian plumber. His name's Mario. Which one's coming out victorious?
Jonah, we'll start with you on this one. Putting you on the spot.
I would say not only Jonah is literally the perfect person to answer this, not only because he directed this movie, but also because the film he directed before this was a UFC documentary called Such Great Heights. So he is like literally the best person to answer.
Oh, nice.
This question.
I always err on the part of speed. I think Sonic's got the speed and the endurance. I think it would be Sonic. As much as I love Mario, I think Mario's a little tubby, and I don't think he can get it done in the ring when Sonic's a monster.
He might sneak his power-ups in there, like the Fire Flower or something. So, you never know.
But he's got to catch him, I guess.
That's true.
Yeah, and it depends what he comes into the ring with.
That's true.
What about you, Blake? I see a lot of confusion on your face or anger. I'm not sure.
Even if you gave Mario every power up, Sonic would still win. Mario is just like he's not an aggressive guy. Now, if you put glaring Luigi in the octagon, that might be a real difference.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good one. I never thought of that one. All right, so one last fun thing for us to do real quick. So a lot of times what we'll do in these interviews is we'll have like a little pop quiz, and then for every question that you get right, we will donate through the channel $25 to St. Jude's. So we're gonna ask you guys, a maximum of 3 questions. To get the bonus question, you got to get the first 2 right. So the first question is gonna be for Blake. So which Sonic the Hedgehog game introduced Sonic's buddy Tails?
I mean, I became a writer because I'm very bad at taking tests, but I actually know this one. Sonic 2 brought us Miles Prower.
Nice.
Correct. Very good.
Bonus, he threw the real name in. Look at that.
All right, that's one down. So that's $25. So one more question. If you get that right, then we'll go to the bonus question.
I don't mean to put the pressure on you, Jonah.
All right.
Okay,
So in the world of consoles, and this may be a little clue here for the answer, but not PC gaming, but in the world of console gaming, Mario Paint was very unique for the Super Nintendo because it came with a unique accessory for the Super Nintendo. What did Mario Paint come with?
Mm.
All right, he's got to do a lifeline. I think.
All right. I'm not gonna
Do we
give.
have lifelines on the show?
Oh, we're code of records.
We can do phone a friend if we,
We can
have
do
to.
a phone a friend.
Yeah.
Blake,
All right.
I need your help.
I think I'll give you a clue. It's a type of animal or rodent that cats like to chase. It's a mouse.
Is that your final answer, sir?
Yeah.
I will take the mouse.
It is a mouse. Yes.
With
Mario,
no help. With no
Mario Paint came with a mouse. That's right. You painted with a mouse. All right. So that's 2 down. So you've that's $50 to St. Jude. So here is the bonus question.
And we're gonna make this fair. Either one of you can answer.
You can work together. You know, whatever. So in 1993, a very infamous video game movie came out. It was Super Mario Brothers, the movie. Okay.
And you're looking at the only 2 men that like that movie.
The main characters, Mario and Luigi, were played by what actors?
John Leguizamo was Luigi.
Nice.
That's correct. And who played Mario?
And Bob Hoskins.
Yes,
Nice.
you redeemed yourself. Very good. All right. So $75 will be going to
Awesome.
St. Jude. So great job, guys. And I think that just about does it for all of our questions.
Yeah,
So-
before you know it, we could talk video games all night, so I think
This
we
is
got to
true.
call this.
So we'd like to give.
We'll come back after you guys have seen it and we can talk about the film.
That would be
Absolutely.
amazing, honestly. That would be
I
amazing.
mean, we'll hold you to
Would
that
love
word.
So we'd like to give a huge shout out to both Blake Harris and Jonah Tolis for coming on this interview today. It was super, super informative. Console Wars is streaming exclusively on CBS All Access starting on September 23rd, and there is a link in the description to sign up for a free 7-day trial. So guys, thank you once again very much. And for the Adventurers Guild, I'm Steve,
Still Jesse.
and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
Thanks so much.